Okay, so we're going to talk about after the initial import from Equi2 for a new project, uh, taking it to the point that it's ready to use. So it's going to come in looking something like this. So these are the dates that have been set in house building. So um, from this point onwards, we're going to control those dates, but you've got to understand we've got to keep this link from the way that we've brought it in to so we can send it back to house building. And that is driven by the fact that on each activity, we're remembering in what's called a user field, we're remembering the ID number of the object in the house building database. And we're also remembering what it is that it's connected to in house building. And we represent those in Powerproject, obviously, by the logic links. So we can unroll this row by clicking on the little plus sign on the left, so we can see those logic links between different tasks. So if they come in a sort of incorrect way, that's because they've been set incorrectly in house building. And why it's important is when you send it back, house building won't let you have a following task that's got a start date that is earlier than the end date of the task that the link is coming from. So you always got to keep it in that order. And that's not usually a problem unless you get into progressing in a strange way. And we'll also talk about that at the end of the show. So one other thing that you need to understand that also comes through from house building and is that there's a date called the forecast legal completion date that can be set in Equi2, and we cannot send back anything in this project where the end date of this row is greater than the date of the forecast legal completion. And we demonstrate, we show that legal completion date with this little blue flag. And so you can see that it's been set horribly in house building. So we've got to do something about that before we can send it back. Ideally, these would be set in the future by whoever's setting the site up, and we can edit this date, which we'll talk about also when we've moved some of the tasks around. So as long as you're aware of that, those are the important points. So when it first comes in, and this is something I'm trying to get changed, we take the start date of the project as being the date that it was imported, but that's probably not the best thing to do, really. So we're going to set this to be the earliest date that we're going to make anything, and that's going to be the 7th of September in this particular case. So we need to change the impost start date on the properties, and we also need to do something with this report date. So this is the so we can see on the bar chart now we've got this grey line. That's the start of the project, and this red line is the progress date, and so we want to change that progress date so that it's also at the start of the project at this stage. So that's the 7th of September 20. So that line will also, that won't go back because it's not the progress report date. We've got to make this one the progress entry period, so that's the active one. And we want to delete this one because that's also got a date. It won't let us do that because it's being used somewhere else. And where it's been used, and again, I'm trying to change this by the time you get to it, is in the reschedule options. We should say we want to use the date that is put all on completed tasks ahead of the progress entry date. So we should have that set up in that way, and then we can delete this one because we don't really need to use it in the future. So we're set up about where we're going to go from this point forward. So this is the opportunity to insert any non-plot items. So before you do anything else, I would insert a row, and I would take, as you got on the training course, I would take the task pool option called early works and drag it up here and drop it in at this point. We're then going to just have a look inside early works itself by changing the scope over here. So you might want to review the things that you're going to do. We might not be doing this thing at all. We might have, this might be taking us 2 weeks. This is going to take 2 weeks also. That's just an event. That's no particular main thing. We might have something else that we've got to do that we hadn't thought of in our standard list, such as remediation, which might take us 3 weeks. And we've got to do that before we can construct the site compound, for example, and we've got to do all of that before we can do that as well. So we can see what happens when we reschedule that, and you get this alert, but you can make it go away for the next time you use it. So you've got those parts already set up, and we can see how that fits in with the plots at this stage. So maybe we can't start the plots until partway through that, and we can obviously factor that in. Or maybe you did all of this lot back in August, in which case we would have to set the project start date and the progress period back to that earliest date. So you do some work on those early works dates, and so that's what we want to do. And just before we start talking about manipulating things, I just want to talk about the anatomy of a view, which again you should have covered in the training course. So there is a view menu. This tab is a view. This tab is a view. And a view has got a different table. So there's lots of different tables there, and we'll look at a few of these. So if we look at the one called Anwyl Standard with build order, because we're going to use that in a minute. So that's the same thing, but it's got a new column here. So this is the order that we're going to put the activities in. So I want these ones to always be at the top. So I'm just going to number those. As you'll see in a minute, that will be useful. So we want to start our next one at 11, or even a bit further if we wanted to. But it's also can have a different filter. So I may want to only show all of the brickwork activities, and then I can give that to the bricklaying trade contractor. So you can filter things out, say no filter to have no filter at all, and you can have a different sort. So we could have this sorted by the end date of the plots, for example. So starting with the latest at the top, or we could adjust the properties of this sort and say we want the earliest ones to be at the top. So you've got lots of possibilities, but you could also sort by plot number, by start date, and if you have no sort at all, it's called the natural order, and that's how it comes in from house building. So if the plots are in the order that you want in house building, you won't have to do anything, but they all seem to be in just a sort of plot numerical order, whereas we want to put them in a different order. So just before I do that, the last thing that a view has is it has a formatting. You can change all these things. So you don't want to see the logic links in this view, for example. You don't want to see the flags. I do want to see the flags. I don't want to see the baseline. So all these things you can turn on and off, and they're specific to this view. Whatever you see on screen is what you're going to get when you print it out. So views are important because it makes your life a lot easier, because we've set a lot of things up in advance. So I want to go back to that topic of we want to sort this plan in the date in which we're going to do the work. And the easiest way I found of doing that is to use Excel. So I've got Excel here, and I've got the plot numbers in the order in which we're going to build them. So we're going to do verse 3, then we're going to do number 43, 44, 45, 46. So this is the order I want them to be in. So here I will say, well, we're going to start from 11, but let's say 20. And I find the easiest thing to do now, you can increment it, but if you hold the control key down and you get that little plus sign there, and you can just drag that down and it's going to increment that. And we need to then sort this by the plot number. So we need to bring in the sort option over here. So we're going to sort this by the plot number. So it's going to be from 1 to 10, and then it's remembered the rows that they would originally be in. So we then got to copy this lot. So this is what we want to have to the clipboard. We go back to Powerproject, and we want to sort this bar chart that we see. So that's the view menu, that's the sort, and we want to have that by the plot number. So we've got it in the spreadsheet, and then I can right mouse click in this cell and say paste. So then every row has got a new value, and we can use that value now to sort it by the build order. So that's now in the order that you want to build them in. Okay, so so there you go. So that's a way of getting them into some order, and we don't need to see this build order column anymore. So we're going to go back to change the table, and the one called Anwyl standard over here is right. And as you can see, it's got a plot number. That plot number is important because that's also a match to house building. So so now we want to talk about the important things of editing dates. So you can see that we've got, and I've turned it off now, but I'll turn it back on again. We've got the logic links. So that gives us the opportunity of manipulating these tasks using the logic. And so again, as you probably saw on the training course, I can select a row and I can just reschedule that selection, and it's going to use the rules just on those rows. And I get a warning down the screen because this flag date is earlier than the last task that it's associated with. And so I wouldn't do this because I can sort it out later, but it needs to be in the future. And then it's a sort of nice blue color, and this has got a sort of red stripe through it warning you that you've exceeded that date. So we use that to represent the forecast legal completion date, but we'll come back to that. So and that's all very well, but if you want gaps in here, then you've got to introduce those manually, and then if you reschedule again, then you are going to put them back. So you could have interplot links. So you might say, we're going to stagger these by a week at a time. So when we've done the first week of that, we're going to start this one. When we've done the first week of that one, we're going to start that one. We're going to do the same thing with the first fix. So you could introduce, and I certainly think there are key places you would do this, like if you had a terrace where there was some real logical constraint, I would do it like this. But also I think there are times when you say, well, we're going to hold it at roof, and we're going to not start that again until January. So you could move just that single activity, and we could put a flag on that, so we could stop it moving any further. So if we then just reschedule that little group, then those rules are going to apply. So you've got those possibilities. I suspect that you would do a little bit of that, but if I just undo back to this point here, so what I think I would probably do is you would probably select the whole row, and you would say, well, we're going to start that on the 2nd of November, and we're going to start the brickwork. So we want to move the rest of it. So we've got to select the rest of the row. We're going to not do the brickwork till after Christmas, so you could manually adjust it, which is time consuming. Hopefully the dates would be correct when they came in, but that's the way it is. Now the other thing, of course, is that the way Ian's been doing it, he's got a spreadsheet with lots of dates in, and so we can use this, and the way we can use that is we need a table in Powerproject to be the same as the order of columns in Excel, and in this view there is a table, standard table under the plots group called build stages dates with no B3 and B4, because you hadn't been using that up to now, and B4 here is coming in from house building, even though in house building it's called B3 because of some oddity of some editing that's been done in the past in house building. So we're just going to ignore that for the moment. And so we've got a column here from this point onwards, start of foundation, end of foundation, B1, B2, all the way to the end, including one for the date of that last milestone that is in a house building and is called building end, and that's got to be there because that terminates the construction phase of the or in-house building. So I don't have to see all of those, but I'm just going to do the first sort of 10 rows, if you like. So I need to be able to see at least the foundation start column in Powerproject. I'm going to go to my spreadsheet and I'm going to copy from here onwards. So if you can see all the dates, that's good. So I'm just going to say, well, the first 9 rows there, I'm going to select all of that right to BD end, and then I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to go back to Powerproject, and I'm going to, on the first column, I'm going to right mouse click here and paste those values. And then you can see it changes all of the dates. And the only times that it don't match is when in the spreadsheet you haven't taken into account the Christmas holidays, for example. And so we will use the start and end date. So these might be shorter than they would have been, or something can't start until after it. So we're just using the dates and changing the durations to suit. Now that's worked for everything apart from these things here. Now you could move them about because they can't be there because they would not let you send it back to Equi2. They've got to be at least after B1. So the way I've been doing that is there is another table. There is another table called build stages all. So that if we scroll across, that includes a B3 and a B4. Now we don't have a B3 in this project, so we can get rid of those. So we just select it, right mouse click and remove this column. So it goes straight from B2 end to B4 start. Now I want to set the start of this to be the end of that. Now I've got to do that in Excel, so I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to go back to Excel. I'm going to go to another tab. I'm going to paste into here and I'm going to format those cells so that it shows me a date but in a 4-digit way. And then I'm going to make a little formula and say I want this cell to be this one plus 1. So we've moved the date on by 1 day. And then I'm just going to copy that down. I should have started that at the top, obviously. And I'm just going to take the first, say, 10 of those, and I'm going to copy those to the clipboard, go back to Powerproject, and in the B4 start column on the first one, I'm going to right mouse click and say paste. Now, it changes the duration, so that's not what I wanted. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to show you how to keep the duration the same. So the way we're going to keep the duration the same is go to the File menu, Options within Powerproject, things that govern everything. And when we change a task, we can either, if we change the dates in the spreadsheet, we can either change the duration, which is what we've been mainly doing, or we can keep the duration and move the task. So with that setting, if I repeat that paste, then it's just going to move the tasks and put them in the right place. So everything else remains the same, and I can then make sure I've remembered to go back to options and set that back to change for this point onwards. So those dates would all go back to Equi2 because they follow the rule of the logic links in that none of them are starting before the predecessor has finished. Um, so it can be very quick. I often export the end dates and then do a check in Excel to make sure nothing's gone wrong. So, but also I wanted to show you a quick way of editing things. So maybe we all think, well, B4 is far too long. So if we go to the Home tab, so we could filter out just B4 as we did before. So we could say on the View tab, I'm just going to filter out, and B4 is not there, so we could choose it from a list. But without filtering it out, I can just select it. So on the Home tab, this Select by Filter is a very useful option. And so we've grouped these together under the Code section. So I want to pick one that I haven't pre-made. I could make a new one at this point, but I'm just going to select this, and it will ask me which task do I want to select based on what code it's got. And I want to pick up just the B4 ones, so they'll be highlighted. And once they're highlighted, I can edit them all as a group. So I could take the properties dialog and do that. So the properties dialog would be this button on the toolbar, or right mouse click and properties. But I find using the object edit toolbar that lives at the bottom of the screen is the easiest way of doing it. And in the duration thing, if I just type 3 days, then all of the selected items will be changed to be only 3 days. So I can then have that arranged in that way. So that's the way that we get it into the order that we want it to be in. Now, I've got one that I've done previously, so I'm going to work on that one from this point onwards. So I've done all of this, and the thing that I would point out that I've done is I've taken the plot end and I've copied that to Excel. I've then added 2 or 3 weeks to that date, and I've pasted it back into this column, and that's how I've set and then the next time that I connect it to Equi2, that link is going to automatically move all the blue flags to match the date that we've got in this column here. So if I want to format that cell differently, I right mouse click format, it's a date, I want this format. So you can have that looking as you want, and wherever you leave the divider on the screen. So if I leave that sitting on the plot end column, when I print that, and we'll talk about printing at the end of this show, it will only print the columns. It won't print anything hidden underneath that slider. So that's a good little tip. So we've got it in this state. And I just wanted to show that, you could also use summary bars to say group things together. So I've seen this done. So you could select 3 rows, and on the Home tab, we could summarize and say these are the show homes. But you can also put all the completed plots into one summary, so then we could hide everything in that summary, and when you print it out, you're not seeing everything hidden. So that's particularly useful for completed tasks, for example, that you don't want to print a whole bar chart, but I'll also show you other ways of doing that on the printing now. So if we don't want to print everything, we could just select a series of rows. So we want to print only the first sort of 18 rows maybe, and we only want to show it from the start of the project till the 1st of April, for example, or the 1st of March. So with the rows selected, if we go to the print side of things, and on the print side of things, we go to the print options, because at the moment it's showing us everything, and that might be okay. But if you've got big projects, do you really want to have the whole thing? You've probably got to print it on a big sheet of paper. But on the print options, you can say, I don't want to print everything. I only want to print a selection. the selection being the things that you've come in, the rows or the tasks that you've come into the print of having already selected. And on the details tab, we can set a from date and a to date. So if I leave that empty, that'll take the earliest task. So I could say I want it from the 5th of October onwards to the end, or I could leave this blank just by deleting everything and say, well, I want to show it from the beginning of everything to the end of February, for example. So then so if I click print, it will come out, but if I click close, it will just keep the preview. So you can see that it's like taking a pair of scissors down the screen and just cut everything off at that point. So you can restrict how much you print, because you've got some big schemes out there, and if you're printing them all the time, what's the point of printing things in the future? Now, the next time you come into this print, it will remember all of that. So when you've finished, you should go back to print everything and reset that, unless you want it to operate the next time that you're in this one. Now, to get all the details down here, for example, like the fact it's Ian or Sean, they'll be blank when you come into it. And if I find on preview, it's quite a useful place to do it, because there is a button here, the third button along, called output fields. So, and because you're going to see it immediately. So if you wanted to, on the chart tab, say that this wasn't Ian, this was Sean, then if you make a change here and click on apply, you'll see it's going to put the change in that cell. Now, they're available at this point, and it's useful when you're printing. You can stay in this print area and do all of that. But if you wanted to set that beforehand, anywhere on the plan, right mouse click on a blank area of the plan and take chart properties, and this is where we're putting the same information. So you can get that in a number of ways, and you might forget it, but at least you can come back to it at this point. So once we have done everything we should have done, and before you start to enter any progress, this is a key moment. This is the moment that you're going to make a baseline. And the baseline is a snapshot at this moment in time, and it will remember everything. And this is important because we can make a comparison to this. And if you made a change to the scheme, a year in, because things have changed, you can make another baseline. Now you can embed it. So you can either, if you don't embed it, the baseline will be a separate Powerproject file, and it will look to it, and that keeps the files fairly small. But I don't think yours are so big that I think you'd be safe to put the data all in this single file. So this file will get bigger, but it's still going to be nothing massive. So if I click on finish here, it just warns me about this embedding, and I'll just say continue. So at this point, we've made a baseline, and if we then go to the formatting, we can display that baseline, and we can see that these are all yellow. If I didn't want them to be yellow, I could go to the formatting of this baseline and say use the color of the stages themselves. So you can see we've got a duplicate. If there's a variance, then we can see what that variance is, and we could have that shown in a column. So they're the things to do before you do anything. And from this point onwards now, I just want to talk a little bit about progressing. So you might want to progress some things manually, but hopefully you're going to do most of it through Site Progress Mobile. And also we can talk about another view. So I've made another view called Progress. So that's got the baseline shown. You could hide that by clicking on that button. It's got some columns and some values that might be useful to you. Just before I do that, I should go back to the this zone, because I did include a graph down here. So at the very bottom, just before the slider, you get that cursor, and if you move that up, there's a sort of value on every completion that gets shown in this graph. This shows you the number of completions you're planning. This is what you'll achieve every month given the state of your plan. And if you just slide that right down to the bottom, it won't print out. If you lost it, you could go to the view, new histogram view. But we're going to look at the progressing again, as I said. And the first thing to do, we've made a baseline. The first thing to do, if we're going to do this manually, like some of this early works, we're going to change the progress date. So we're going to right mouse click here, properties to change it, or we can double click on that big black line if we can see it, and then you get a properties dialog here. Same thing you get by right mouse click and say, well, we want to move this on to, let's say, the 22nd. So I always use a Sunday, although it means you can't send it back to Equi2 until this date is passed. So you've got to wait till Monday morning to send it back to Equi2. And then anything that's sitting behind that line that hasn't been done will bend that line backwards. So you can edit these individually. You can select a single task, and on the tab up here you can say, well, I've done 100% of that. You could type in here and say I've done 100% of that. We can select a whole series by clicking and shift clicking. So we select everything, and then we could say we've done 100%, or we could say, using that date, where would it cut through a task? And I could right mouse click on this task and say progress it up to that date, so as though everything has gone according to plan. Now that might be true apart from this one, which is we haven't even started, so that line gets bent backwards, and that's the value that we call slip. So that's why that's bent backwards by a week. So and so we can see that this is a week in delay. Now what I'd rather you did, but this will take a while to get to, is that you would reschedule this, and that would put uncompleted activities ahead of time now when you rescheduled. Now it's going to be probably tricky for you to reschedule the body of it, which we'll come on to now. But what we really want to do is try and get progress in the state it is before you start using Site Progress Mobile. So maybe you've and by control clicking, I can select a whole series, and I can say that these are all done. I can use this enter progress mode and say I want to be in a progress entry mode, and in the top half of the task, it's a little tricky, in the top half you get a percentage sign, and I could paint the progress on and say, well, we've done 70% of that in whole numbers of days. I can undo that, and I could say with it selected that we've done 75% of it. It will keep a whole number of days, and so you're saying, well, I've done 75%, but I must have done it before that date. So really, this lot must be sitting there in the past, and so that's not the way you want to see it. And I'll show you how you can get back to that view. So maybe you didn't do this one. This one really should be sitting in the future. So you've either got to speed that one up, or you've got to move this whole lot. And again, you could reschedule it, but maybe you would manually process it and say all of that lot has to sit in the future, and this one we've done that on time. So we've done 20% of it, so we're slightly behind. So, but we're gonna knock a date. It's only going to take us 15 days to do that now, so we can move that along. So I would say this will be the classic way of doing it, in that everything that you've done is completed, and in the past, everything that remains to be done is in the future. Because if it's not in that way, you cannot use the future dates to tell people when they're doing things, because it will be still jagged. And there is still a view under the progress one called jagged progress. And what jagged progress does, if we have this option set, it uses the baseline, because we're in the show homes here, so that's why we see it uses the baseline and paints the current progress onto the baseline. So that is what you would have done if you'd have just not moved the activities around on the plan. So one day, I hope you'll see the benefit of doing it this way, but until that time comes, it's fine to mark up the program here in the way that you might want to. So we've done a little bit of that. We've done too much of that. We haven't done enough of this. So I can see and demonstrate to my troops and the board that we need to accelerate this one a tiny bit if we're going to meet those dates. But I can't show you the impact that has because this bit is in the future. To show that impact, this bit would have to be behind that row, and I'd have to bring this lot forward. So there's pros and cons of it. This is the simplest way. It's probably the way you've been doing it, but I hope in time you'll see the benefit of that jagged progress way. So thanks for your attention. If you've got any questions, you get stuck, you can always call me. If you can't reach me, you can reach the help desk. And thanks for your